Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think I know some of you who I see popping up as entering the waiting room. Welcome to this workshop, Shaping the Future, Empowering Students to Change the World. And in particular, the title of this webinar is A Postcard from the Future. There's your postcard that some of you may have got or saw on LinkedIn, but effectively, we are going to take you on a journey into the future. Now, if you are going on a trip, it seems a bit of a distant memory, but normally when we do go on a sort of a trip, if you like, I always start thinking and imagining what the future destination might look like. I've seen pictures of it, but nonetheless, I do have visual pictures in my head, a sense of feeling as to what my actual final travel destination might look like. So very quickly, just using the chat box, and you don't have to be too specific, what I would like you to do is just take a couple of minutes to imagine what your future destination of climate action in 2025 might look like. And if you can just use the chat box, just jot something down. This is an exercise we do live with students. We get them to pull some thinking from their imagination. So if you could just use the chat box and just very quickly jot down what you think your final destination of climate action will look like in 2025. Okay. Fiona, can you see chat? Any sort of...
Yes, everybody's just saying good morning at the moment. So
right.
People, you need to give people a minute or two more, I think, to answer.
Okay, I'm so excited for our trip.
Yeah,
so excited for our trip.
Yeah, so do you want to just repeat the question, Anne?
Right, in 2025, can you use the chat function to just jot down what you think the future destination of climate action in 2025 will look like, and you don't have to be too specific. Gasp of air, dry heat, interactive, lots of bikes. This is an exercise we do with students face to face, and we'll continue to do it live, is I think we all have within our imagination some inkling, some sense of purpose of the impact we want to have around a particular sector or issue. For the purposes of this workshop, we were looking at climate action. And the reason why we do that with students is we want them to know that they have this sense of purpose, they have this imagination in them already. So what we want to do with students is we want them to start thinking about stories of the future. This is one of my favourite quotes, which is stories of the future have the power to liberate us from the what was and what is. And I think that's particularly important in our current situation regarding COVID-19, that we look at what could be, that's not just the new normal. But what we want to do is we want to get students to actually having the confidence to imagine a possible future that is aligned with their sense of purpose, to take what they have in their minds already, that simple exercise, and to start really channeling it into a way of thinking, some mindset development, using some tools and techniques that we give them to actually have the confidence to imagine a possible future, to act on that future, and to have a clear sense of purpose. The challenge that we all have is we know that stories of the future have the power to be really powerful, and we want to design around these future stories, but all too often anything we design is not aimed at the future. We get bogged down in things like the flow of trends, existing use of technology that dictates how things will inevitably be. What we're trying to get students to do is to really start designing the future in the present day by actually being able to imagine and tell stories about a possible future. And that design is not necessarily new products and services. It could be new processes, new policies, new ways of doing things. And I just very quickly wanted to touch on the Scottish Innovation Student Awards, because the postcard from the future is basically aligned around the outcomes of these awards. I won't spend too much time on these because I know some of you are already familiar with them. But as you know, SISA, or the Scottish Innovation Student Awards, is very much about getting students to understand themselves, their sense of purpose, and more importantly, to be able to engage with their external world and the pace of change. And just very quickly, SISA Level 1 occurs within the curriculum, where we're looking at students starting to think about possible futures and their role in it. Level 2 is a national day. It's normally face-to-face. It is going online. Again, I can give you more information on that. But Level 2 is all about students coming together in multidisciplinary teams to travel to the future. At SISA Level 2, we give them a brief where they've been tasked by the Scottish Government to travel into the future to see how a particular innovation goal is being implemented, to imagine and tell stories about that possible future, and then to come back to the present day to tell these stories to other stakeholders and to look to say, here are the products and services and the action steps that have to happen now. Level 3, very much around a student's sense of purpose and finding themselves. It's a self-led piece of work where they choose a United Nations sustainability goal of interest to them and look at what the possible stories of the future around that goal should be, and then talk about the opportunities for innovation in the present to make sure that goal is implemented. And the purpose of SISA, and this idea of getting students through SISA to imagine possible futures around the goals and to tell stories that they bring back to the present day, is not for students to speculate about what the future might be, but to use some research methodologies to actually experience a possible future, to be really specific about what that future is, their role in it, to walk in other people's shoes, what we call imagination empathy, and also to walk in their own future shoes, if you like, to see what skills and competencies they need to develop in that particular future. So just some broad aims for SISA. Effectively experience a future they have imagined and build a bridge to that future for themselves, something they come back from their trip to say, this is the future, I've seen it, and they show it to other people. And they use that bridge they've built to the future to catalyse confident action in the present around a sense of purpose. And this could be competency development and or new venture creation. What I heard an academic talk about last week, and I've got his details on another slide, but this agile ambition, if you've built this build to the future, this bridge to the future, you're not just going to sort of say, well, I'll just sit back and see what happens. You're going to be agile, your ambition is going to be agile. So effectively, ladies and gentlemen, what you're going to see for the remainder of the session, we're going to get you into some breakout rooms to interact, is I'm old enough to remember, you know, friends of my parents coming round on a Saturday night with their slides from the future and saying, you know, here's our trip, here's what we experienced. Effectively, what you're getting is a slideshow around the student's trip to the future. And we're going to talk a little bit about the methodology that got them to that future, that's behind their holiday snaps, if you like, and talk a little bit about how those holiday snaps of a future or stories of the future can inspire you to take action in the present day. So what you're about to see is the holiday snaps from SISA Level 2. We were lucky enough to be able to do SISA Level 2 in Dundee. We had 138 students drawn from all over Scotland, multidisciplinary, multi-level, ranging from first year through to postgrad and PhD. And we set the students the challenge of travelling to the future and experiencing a future around the implementation of United Nations Sustainability Goal 13, in particularly looking at how you could build organisational and individual capacity to help implement that goal by being part of climate action. So this is the goal we set them. They were tasked again with the brief on behalf of the Scottish Government to travel into the future, imagine possible futures around climate action and bring them back to the present day to say, here's the bridge to the future around climate action goal 13. What are we going to do now in the present to make sure that we cross that bridge? Okay, so if some of you are attending the Future of Learning workshop later this afternoon, we'll talk a lot more depth about some of the worksheets that are going to be used in SISA going forward. We did the SISA Level 2 live, obviously, in February. Those of you who know me know that I turn up with my suitcase, lots of worksheets, lots of packs of signal cards around a chosen topic, and my Sharpie pens. But putting SISA Level 1 and Level 2 online, we are going to use worksheets that are based around this particular graphic here. Some of you might recognise that as the futures triangle from a futurist called Sahil Anatula. Now, I know I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, but this is a recognised foresight tool. And I think it sums up what we do in SISA very, very well. So we always get a topic. In this case, SISA Level 2 was the future of climate action, but in the past, we've looked at the future of cities and communities, we've looked at the future of health. And what we say to students, to be a designer of the future, somebody who can imagine powerful stories of the future that have a sort of robust methodology behind them, you've got to understand how change happens. And we say that there's a lot of noisy forces at play in terms of how a future develops. And we've divided them into 3 dimensions here, what we call the push of the present, the weight of history or the past, and the pull of the future. Now, a great example of a pull of the future is things like visions. What are strong visions of the future that are so strong, they say this is the future that we want. It becomes very compelling. We want to innovate towards it. And I think, each of the United Nations Sustainability Goals is a really strong example of a pull of the future. It can be government agendas, strategy papers, other people's powerful visions of the future. So the pull of the future tends to be quite visionary, things that are set out, goals, ambitions, timelines, etc. Weight of history, that can be things like expensive infrastructure. It can be culture, values, beliefs, behaviours, things that are sort of rooted in the past. Push of the present, that's where some of you may be familiar with how we unpack what we call the push of the present. We talk a little bit about the drivers of the present, the trends, and this is where you can use stuff like a pestle analysis or a steeple analysis, things like political drivers, economic drivers, social drivers, technical drivers, legal, economic. And if any of you are interested, we have a worksheet that can help you unpack that particular box to look at drivers. And what we always say to students are drivers always have a trajectory. So start thinking about, what's the impact of a particular driver. So an example around climate action could be, for example, I'm going to pick a technical one, more and more people using mobile phones. So what's the impact of that when you're looking at the future of climate action? It could be a demand for more mobile phones that can be recycled, something like that, yeah. So push of the present, it can be a data point that by the year 2025, more and more people will be using X. But we always get the students to think of a driver as having a particular impact. What's the trajectory of that impact? And we also say to students, a key part of the push of the present is don't be afraid to look for small innovations that are happening out there already in the margins that are responding to these drivers and impacts. So go out and look for innovations that are happening already. Don't be afraid to look across different sectors, but look for small innovations out there that if they were to scale up, they really form a push or momentum from the present day that could actually shape the future of climate action. So again, if any of you like more information and signals, I have signal packs I can share. I can give you an example of how we put a signal into a particular template. But the key thing when we're looking at signals or clues, sometimes clues is quite a good word, is that we think of them as they're not issues. So for example, climate action is the issue, but here is an innovation out there in the margins, a signal. This is Greta striking outside her school. That's a signal. It's an innovative act that she took on board to do. And you saw it scale up. And this is her standing in the square in Helsinki about to address a rally. So it's not the issue. Signals are small events. They can be terribly local that are happening out there in the margins. And this is another one that's a signal. I could pick a driver where we have more and more people, what I call a social driver, more and more people wanting to see our plastic waste disposed of well. This is a picture of children in an Ashoka school in India, and they have to bring 25 pieces of plastic waste to their school every week to be recycled as part of their school fees. Now, their education is free anyway, but this is almost compulsory, and what they say is it does generate this whole community of how do we dispose of our plastic waste well. Okay, this is the other sort of worksheet that I think sums up what we do in a SISA Level 2 day. Again, we're going to work with this in a little bit more depth at the workshop this afternoon. But again, if any of you are interested in knowing more about these worksheets and how to use them with your students, please do drop us an email. And you'll also find these worksheets on our Padlet as well. So effectively what we do is, so I should probably just come back a little bit to this, is what we say to the students is that this triangle does not remain static. Each of those sides, if you can imagine them built out of string or elastic, they move. And some of those dimensions and the factors in them will have a stronger force than others. So for example, we know, not so much relating to climate action, but we know that COVID-19 in terms of the future of learning has really sort of pulled the weight of history out of its sort of equal position, if you like, because we're having to move out of existing infrastructure and classrooms to deliver more face-to-face work. So what we always say to the students is, when we've been sort of prototyping and piloting this worksheet over the summer, but we do the same in SISA Level 2, is we sort of get them to identify, in each of those boxes, what do they think are the most predominant forces? What do they think are the really big forces that have the power to sort of pull that triangle out of shape, if you like? We sort of liken it to cat's cradle. And once the students have done that, we say, right, we're going to use the big noisy forces that you've identified to build some future worlds. So with this one in particular, we get them to do a what if statement. So take a noisy force from one of these boxes and build a what if statement, and then start to pull the consequences out of that. So I might pick, for example, a pool of the future around one of the goals, and I might say, what if in 5 years' time all students will be taught climate action as a life skill in the same way they'd be taught sex education? And then we start to pull out all the consequences from that, the sort of direct, the less indirect, the even more indirect, if you like. And then what we get them to do, and certainly we'll be sort of re-emphasising this in our SISA Level 2 that we do, is we get them to build their world. And what we really want them to do is what we call specific induction into this future world. Be really specific. Use your consequences to start telling a story about this particular future world. For example, a student in 5 years' time who's been taught climate action as a part of a life skill. What will their timetable look like? Who will they be taught by? Where will they be taught? What products and services might they be using in their teaching? Really what we call the specific induction into this future to really hook them into this future world, and also to have this empathy, which is sort of step 3. What will they be feeling? Are they happy with this future world? Would they like the products and services to go further? And really starting to get the students to spot opportunities for innovation. And not all these future worlds can be happy. There could be some risks in this future world. And really what we're looking for the students is to pull out a picture of this future world where there are opportunities to be innovated around in the present and risks to be mitigated against in the present. Okay, so this is just another example of what I was doing here. What if waste materials are a valuable new resource in 5 years' time? So that picks up on the little signal I showed you around the push of the present with the children taking plastic to school. It's a currency. And just in case you're thinking, oh, you know, is that just one example? When you start looking for signals, you start to see a lot. And I came across another signal of a fashion designer working with a food bank in London. I think it's the Trestle Trust, I think, and effectively people bring plastic waste to that food bank in return for food, and that plastic waste is then passed on to a fashion designer who uses that plastic waste in her materials that she uses. So again, you'll see how I've pulled out the what if from that. Waste can become a new currency for goods and services. Maybe the most direct consequence of that what if statement is companies will have to look at how to dispose of their waste in ways that gives this waste what we call a legacy status. You know, it's no longer a waste, it becomes a legacy material that has a story to be told that can be used in new products and services. There's just me putting down the sort of verbal example I gave you there earlier. Okay. So using, you know, effectively that methodology, I've just condensed it into the 2 new worksheets that we're going to use going forward, because we don't have the opportunity to run face-to-face workshops anymore, handing out drivers and impacts worksheets, Sharpie pens and signal packs. So effectively, what we're going to get you to experience is the future that the students created using the methodology that you see within those worksheets. And we would like you to think a little bit about how you engage with the posters. You know, is there a very specific induction to them? Do they immediately engage your imagination and your empathy? And we talk a little bit about the 5-5-55 rule when we're telling stories about the future. You can get something from the posters you're about to see, the students' stories of the future in 5 seconds, something in 5 minutes, something in 55. I'd also like you to have a think about is they quite deliberately don't break the universe. When we're getting people to imagine the future, it's not all about coming up with groundbreaking, you know, space age, new materials, new products and services. We're looking for students to almost be able to say to you, guess what, the future's already here. You know, it's just not very evenly distributed, which is another of my favourite quotes from William Gibson. And what you'll see is in each of the posters is a recognised medium or scenario, but the content is different. And they're not designed to answer all the questions. There's deliberate rabbit holes, or what we call hint of transformational pathways that are worthy of further exploration, other future travellers who might be different stakeholders. They could be students, they could be academics, they could be other people from government policy, etc. So what I'm going to do is run very quickly through the posters, and then we're going to put you into breakout rooms to get you to look at a particular poster. So we deliberately put it together as what we call the Museum of the Future. Just as you go to an exhibition that says this is what the past looked like, here's what people used, here's the material, here's them going about their working lives in the past using these products and services that we've dug up. The Museum of the Future is all about artifacts of the future that say here is what the future can look like and feel like. We have used some robust methodology to build some future worlds, and this is us telling our stories that allow you to experience them rather than speculate to say this is what the future could look like and feel like. As we're going through the posters, you're very welcome to use the chat function to post any immediate reaction as we go through the posters. At the end, we'll direct you to the posters and Padlet, where we'd like you to almost think about the posters as being an exhibition at the end of which you have a visitor's book where you leave some comments about them, but more about that as we move through the posters. So I'm just going to move very quickly through them. This is a little bit about, you know, what is the Museum of the Future, how it's been curated. Effectively, you know, this is all about the students' stories of the future that shows how things could evolve and communicates their experience of the future to inform better insights in the present as to how we can act. Okay. So just running through very quickly, thank you to our graphic artist, Lee Monroe, who I know is listening, for doing the drawings. But effectively what you're seeing here is what was catalysed at SISA level 2, the stories that were catalysed and the sort of new innovations, products and services that the students think belong in this future world. So one of the key themes coming out of the students engaging with climate action was that they wanted to be part of something bigger, that people on an individual level want to know the impact they're having. So you see here, for example, a company monitoring their employers using an app that tells them that, you know, how much of the carbon emissions reduction they have contributed to by walking to work, to cycling to work. You see that the company putting their employees' contribution to carbon emissions to work. It goes on to the company's bottom line, if you like. It forms part of their company reports. And that actually, their employees' engagement in that also becomes part of the company's value proposition as well. Companies in the future are looking for new ways of adding value to what they do for customers, etc. I don't want to go through all of these in great detail, but I just wanted to say that this is the sort of the first very familiar medium you see here of a living room, a shop, travel to work, an artifact to the future, but the students are telling a future story around that. This is 2025. Virtuous nature, the title for this came about, you know, we hear a lot about, you know, fertilizers, green gas emissions from dairy farms, etc. So here again, very familiar medium. We see the community compost heap where you can put plastic on that decomposes. Things like bioplastic comes out of the labs and into mainstream supply chains, both you know, upstream, downstream, if you like. Manure becomes a valuable resource. It's going off to a construction company, and we see different types of partnerships where we see people being prescribed by their GP through the social prescription programme to go and work on a farm. Life skills involving a local school, victory gardens, being taught about climate action, silver eco-warriors who have a lot of time on their hands to contribute to climate action, turning up to help in the garden. This idea of us all being a community having a common purpose, Sunday markets where everything for sale is scrap, from local pottery shards to empty pill packets to textile scraps, etc. We've got children being taught how to mend their toys and pass them on. New perceptions and responsibilities, both upstream and downstream for a company, where the retail floor transforms into the starting point of an upstream supply chain. So the material that companies need to make new clothes, the upstream starts on the retail floor where people are bringing back clothes to be recycled. Home-based eco-warriors, again, the mattress being picked up. One there shows you know, people being able to browse what's the inventory on their local high street rather than sort of go and take the car and go out of town, etc. And just to give you a scale of the number of students involved in our SISA Level 2 Day in February, congratulations to all of them for getting their SISA Level 2. Some went on to get their SISA Level 3. But I think it shows the strength of demand for students wanting to be able to experience futures, engage with it, find their place in it, develop their sense of purpose and their confidence and ability and agility to engage with the pace of change. Okay, so if you imagine the future, and we always say this to the students as well, we always end our SISA Level 2 days by getting them to pitch a product or service that they could action in the present day that would bring about and belong in one of the futures that they've created. So really, as part of sort of building this bridge to the future and coming back to the present day, it's really to think about building new models that make the old models obsolete. And what we like to think in those scenarios that we've just presented, there's lots of new business models in there that make existing business models obsolete. So what we're going to do in your groups, we're going to allocate you a Museum of the Future poster, and then using the 5-5-55 rule, and that's just an indication, we'd like you to think, what can you take from them in 5 seconds? What can you take from them in 5 minutes? What senses do they bring into play? You know, what empathy, who do you start to empathize with? Can you visualize other things that could be added? Do they bring some senses into play? And I'll talk a little bit in a moment, is that I got sent through the States, but some little things that we had a bit of trouble clearing customs, but it's called Sniff the Future. You know, can you smell the manure? Can you smell? Can you feel? Can you hear voices? So do think about the senses these posters bring into play. These are stories from the future that the students are now showing to you to say this is what the future could look and feel like. So we don't have 55 minutes, but can you see any rabbit holes in the posters, what we call pathways to transformation that you would like to go down if you had the time? Think collaborations, think industry crossovers. Can you see new job roles emerging, new competencies needed, and opportunities for innovation that would generate these new models? So for example, if we have to generate the new business models we see in there, you know, would new job roles emerge? Would new competencies be needed as a result of these job roles? These are just my indications. You are completely free to experience these posters in a way that you want to do. We just ask that you do experience them. So I think that's us, Raleigh. If we could put them into groups, we're going to show you links to the poster that your group's going to work with and your groups in chat. Great, okay, could I call upon somebody to volunteer from group 1 to tell us what poster you had and any sort of feedback you would like to share on how you engaged with it, what did it provoke, any opportunities or risks you saw in that future scenario?
Okay, I was in group 1.
Great, thank you very much.
Not at all. There were
what poster were you working with?
There were 4 of us, and we chose the first poster, since we were group 1. Unadventurously, we chose the first poster, which was around life skills and the idea of introducing life skills into the school curriculum, and various initiatives to that. So one interesting aspect of the poster was the bringing in senior members from the community to interact with the children in the school. Yeah. And one of the points that was brought up by a member in our team is that there were a lot of skills in the older generations that focused around the reuse and repair and recycling of goods, and that we don't necessarily have the same attitudes today, where we tend to buy a replacement rather than repair what we have. And so it was an interesting point, because in one of the initial models that we saw that the past was a weight, something that was somewhat negative and drew down from the possibilities of the future and the pushing from the present. But it was also important to recognize that there are important lessons to be learned from the past, and that the past can still actually inform us to do things better for the future. So that was a point that stood out.
I really like that, because I think it's so easy to ignore the weight of history and the possibilities that it has to shape the future. We tend to ignore it and focus on all the technology and the new things happening. And I think that's a really interesting one, that, you know, we can leverage our existing infrastructure, our values and beliefs and culture to really bring about change. And we'll explore that a little bit more in the afternoon session on learning. I think the terminology they're giving to these group of old people now is called the old. I'm not quite sure, but certainly, you know, they're affluent, they've got something to offer, they've got grandchildren they want to leave a legacy for. Yeah, so I think that's a Japanese term. They're called the old. Yeah, but thank you for that. Okay, group 2, calling group 2. Can you give us a point from the poster?
Hi everyone. Hi. Okay. Well, yeah, we I suppose we did the 5, 5 and 55 as best we could. So the 5 seconds, we went, in terms of looking at the pictures, we didn't think there was anything that looked hugely innovative to begin with. It all looked as though it was...
What poster were you working with, Ros?
Sorry, we were at the home-based eco-warriors.
Yeah.
Apologies. So that was our sort of 5-second take on it. And then in terms of, we then went away and read the artifact. So again, we felt that there was a lot that we were probably already doing in terms of, you know, what was listed. So artifact one was, you know, really shopping through using apps. And we talked about the fact we're currently using Amazon, but that's not actually that great in terms of the carbon footprint, where Amazon's delivering on a daily basis to lots of houses. We felt artifact 2, which was about the pad on the stairs where you generated your kinetic energy, was actually a great idea and something we would really welcome, because we're at home that much more these days that actually we could potentially power up a lot of our domestic appliances using it. The school bin idea using recycling, sorry, I'm just reading it quickly. A smart bin that reads the barcodes. Yeah, we thought that was a great idea as well. Presumably, or possibly because we're not allowed to touch so much these days. We're able to, we're passing things on, aren't we, through touch. So actually, that would be a really great idea. And then the artifact 4, which was about recycling, getting people to come to your house and recycle things, we felt was already being done really, again, through marketplace on Amazon and Facebook, and actually a lot of social enterprise companies are out there doing it as well. So there was some, as you said earlier, Anne, you don't necessarily have to have a new product or service. There's a lot that currently exists, but we felt there was the ideas were great to sort of develop and think innovatively and think of different ways of doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's back to that favourite quote that I always talk about, you know, the future's already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. And that's one of the key things behind the poster, is to say that, you know, actually this future's here, if you like, and getting students to sort of engage with it. And because I think sometimes, not all students, but, you know, we can hand out examples of signals that are innovation that, you know, can be 2 or 3 years old, but they're new to a student. You know, so sometimes it can be a gentle induction, if you like, into the pace of change. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to ask just one more group to feedback, because on Padlet we have the opportunity for you to leave some thoughts. So I'm going to be very random and go with group 5. If you could tell us what poster you had, and if we could ask for a volunteer just to feedback.
All right.
Hi there. Hi, Arena. How are you? Thank you for volunteering. What poster did you have?
Even though we were group 5, we chose poster 6, part of something bigger, it's called. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we had a look at it, and we know it was created pre-COVID, so we kind of thought how we would match these times now. So, for example, just quickly, in the first point on the image, people are working in buildings. Now we can work from home, and I know it's about they were looking at green footprint that provides to all its employees there. But just like the artifact one is about that, but we just looked at the image for that one, and just seeing that people would go to work by foot or by bicycle. And now for the COVID-19 situation, it's just people walking and doing exercise. And for number 3, we saw people going to a grocery store. And also artifact 3 talks about that people can shop on their way home from work, but now we can shop from home. And on the climate change, we thought about you know, signals, as you mentioned, like what is going on now that can happen in the future, or can give us an idea of what will happen in the future. And we just thought about volunteering organizations that do that. So I was biased, and I talked about Arju Go Green, because we have 4 schemes, bike paths, so we help students to cycle to uni or to just exercise by cycling. And that would reduce the carbon footprint. We've got Came Shop, which donates secondhand items like clothes and home items on campus to students. Then there's Leave Baker Cafe, and we collaborate with food banks to create free meals for students. And then there's also Veg Bag, where we collaborate with Aberdeenshire farmers to create veg bags for students there, organic vegetables. And I know it'll be a bit difficult now during COVID-19 times, but we just thought that these whole ideas were quite good.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time, Rita. Thank you very much for that, very insightful, but I think you made some interesting points about just how quickly futures can change. You know, and also each of these posters could be broken down into a sub-future. For example, you could look at the future of working. I think that's particularly relevant in the COVID world we're in. You know, that's had a sort of push-pull on that triangle I showed you earlier. So I think each of these posters could be broken down into a sub-future to look at as well. Okay, so please do go to the Padlet, have a look at all the posters. As I said, they're the work of the students looking to tell stories about the future. They're there to help people experience a future. I came across this in a shop window the other day. It's not a dream if you've been, and that's what we always say to the students. You know, basically the key thing is if you've imagined the future and experienced it, the key thing is to link your imagination and what we're calling foresight to action in the present. And sort of picking up on our travel theme, you know, what happened in the future comes home to the present. If you travel, you say, what happened in Ibiza stays in Ibiza, not when you're looking at the future. So what we wanted to do with the students working with that methodology, producing these posters, is to help them experience a future, build a bridge through these posters to that future for other people to look at these posters, engage with them, look for transformational pathways. Maybe they see some of the products in, for example, the home care setting and think, well, actually, I could do better. I could make better products than the ones that I see in those futures that I've just imagined. But also catalyze confidence. So for example, you know, think about what do they see in these posters that might lead to them wanting to think about, here are the competencies that I have to develop to be part of this future or to change that future. And there's the academic I mentioned earlier. I heard him speak last week at a conference, David Francis. He talked about agile ambition. You know, these posters being giving them the agility to think, well, here's the future that I want to work with. And if anybody's interested, drop us an email. We do something at our SISA Level 2 day where what happens at SISA Level 2 doesn't stay at SISA Level 2. The students have to think about how they performed when they were imagining this future and to think about how they develop further innovation competencies as a result of their travel to the future. These were just some of the sort of the pathways that we saw in those posters. I mentioned them when I was going through the posters, like breakthrough material science coming out of the labs into the very heart of organisation, and information technology will enable action to be taken from the bottom up, etc. So effectively here you see Padlet. You can access all the posters from SI's Museum of the Future on our guest book. You're welcome to view the posters in your own time. It'd be great to see some comments like our visitors book. And also if you go to the Padlet, you'll see some of the worksheets that we use to get the students to produce those posters. We'll take apart those worksheets in some more depth in the worksheet this afternoon. Okay, if any of you are interested in SISA, here's just some comments from them. Interesting one, assessing the impact of future projects in the workplace in terms of economic, social and environmental stability. Yeah, so we get incredibly positive feedback from the students using the methodology and working with the United Nations Sustainability Goals. If you're interested in SISA, if you're not already involved, you can find out more information on our website, or you can get in touch via info@si.ac.uk. So thank you for allowing me to show the students' holiday slides, their journey into the future of climate action, which took place in February of this year. And again, you're welcome to info any questions you have, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at this afternoon session who are really going to use the worksheets around the topic of the future of learning to see what artifacts the future we can generate around the future of learning. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, I'll stay on for 5–10 minutes just in case anybody's got any chat, and you're welcome to pose some questions. If not, drop me an email or I'll see some of you at this afternoon session. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the worksheet, the workshop. As I say, I'll just stay on. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
Anne, can I ask a question? Sorry.
You can indeed.
I'm just wondering, so the cohorts and examples that you showed us came from a university group. Do you work with colleges? Do you work with schools? What groups do you work with?
We work with all groups. I mean, we work with educators right down to, right down is not the right word, to colleges. You know, the methodology can be adapted. We've college people attending SISA Level 2 days, going on to do SISA Level 3. We haven't as such
I'm really sorry to interrupt, Anne, but we have to end the session to begin our panel.
Okay, very quickly, what we do with a lot of the posters we generate, so very quickly we're working with a group of students at Aberdeen University called Science and Society, and we're going to produce a set of posters that they will then take into schools. And sometimes we just use different terminology. We might not use the big forces. We've got other tools and techniques that we can allow students to use to tell stories, to build up imaginary worlds. Yeah.
Okay.
That's just the size of methodology. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Riley. Appreciate we've got to end.
If anyone has any other questions, please just forward them to info@si.ac.uk and we'll make sure we answer all of them. We just have to close the session at the moment so we can start the next one. So see you at the panel session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Anne.